Excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to thank members of the CARICOM for inviting me to interact and exchange ideas on issues of common interest to us. I have recently held a similar exchange with the countries of the Pacific States. I'm particularly aware of the vulnerabilities and challenges faced by CARICOM countries. Even though the pandemic has not fully reached the shores of CARICOM, the economic and social fallout has been devastating, with sharp falls in revenue, particularly related to the tourism sector and related supply chains, as well as the contraction in commodity prices, foreign direct investment flows, and remittances. Many highly indebted countries in the region are facing extremely preoccupying liquidity and solvency problems. Furthermore, ECOSOC has estimated that the regular annual disaster losses in the Caribbean are in the range of about $3 billion annually, with significant impacts on the social and productive sectors. I'm happy that CARICOM countries have made their voice heard in the discussion groups of the Financing for Development initiative convened by the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Canada and Jamaica. As you know, the menu of options which have been put forward include some interesting proposals, such as the extension and expansion of the debt service suspension initiative of the Group of 20, the so-called ECOSOC, and for it to include ways to engage the private sector creditors. The debt for SDG or climate swaps, buybacks of commercial debt, new allocations of special drawing rights, and the reallocation of unallocated quotas of SDRs. ECOSOC has also made some important recommendations for a resilient fund for the Caribbean through a debt swap initiative with a green climate fund. I hope that the summit on SDG financing taking place tomorrow will react positively to these proposals. Following the summit and taking into account the decisions that are taken, it would be useful, I think, for the Economic and Social Council and perhaps also the General Assembly to consider further follow-up actions that may be required to get political decisions. In my view, it would be important for CARICOM and other developing countries to focus on some items for political approval, some important proposals that we can follow for a political decision by the states and institutions concerned. Overcoming the COVID, climate, and SDG challenges requires short, medium, and long-term actions. Several CARICOM countries are already spending between 1% to 4% of GDP to tackle the COVID crisis. Stimulus packages have entailed a broad range of critical measures in the economic and social areas while shouldering the healthcare spending on COVID-19. International support and partnerships are obviously critical for CARICOM countries to maintain progress on their development agendas. I am committed to ensuring that we use the mandate and the machinery of ECOSOC to enhance the realization of your immediate priorities, as well as to keep on course in advancing your medium and long-term priorities. In particular, in the FFD forum, we can explore how to scale up financing to respond to the pandemic and in investing in disaster risk reduction, mitigation and adaptation, resilient infrastructure, and epidemic and pandemic prevention. In the Development Cooperation Forum of ECOSOC, we could advance coherent implementation of the 2030 and Addis agendas, the Paris Agreement and the Sendai framework. Furthermore, in the FFT Forum, the UN Tax Committee and the ECOSOC Special Meeting on International Tax Cooperation, we can reflect on how taxation can increase resilience and also address illicit financial flows and tax evasion, among other things. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ECOSOC provides space to discuss some of the other priorities of CARICOM. I would encourage CARICOM members which have not yet done so to participate in the voluntary national review at the high-level political forum on sustainable development. VNRs can be a vehicle for highlighting the key challenges and vulnerabilities faced by CARICOM countries and to mobilize support. The HLPF in particular will review SDG 13 on climate change. The operational activities segment will discuss how to reinforce further the support of the UN development system to CARICOM countries and to all SIDS. I look forward to the further reporting and consultations to be carried out by the Secretary General as requested by ECOSOC and the General Assembly to implement his recommendations on the review of multi-country offices. Apart from finance, Excellencies, I've identified two other priorities for my presidency this year. One is sustainable infrastructure, and the second is science and technology. I believe both these areas are responsive to your priorities. I'm working on a proposal for a public-private partnership infrastructure investment facility to generate financing for commercially viable projects from the private sector. And this will, as I envisage it, this would have a component for concessional or blended financing for projects which are not normally considered commercially viable, but are essential for the concerned countries. I look forward to discussing this facility with your group and other members in the near future. I feel that in relation to science and technology, we could initiate several actions that are of systemic importance to developing countries. First, to align the intellectual property regime with the SDGs. As you would recall, exceptions were made for AIDS treatment, and I hope that exceptions will also be made for the future COVID vaccine from IP restrictions. Such preferred arrangements should be made also for important SDG targets as well. Secondly, the work on the COVID vaccine also shows that when there is a clear and pressing objective, financial resources can be mobilized for research and development. It is, I think, urgent to identify the kind of scientific breakthroughs that are required in order to advance the SDGs. For example, technologies for cheaper housing, cheaper transport, agricultural production in different circumstances. Developing countries, including CARICOM, should set targets for research and development so that public money and ODA in particular can be directed to achieving such scientific breakthroughs. Finally, I believe we need to work on how we can all graduate into the digital economy. The largest number of jobs, as we all know, are being created in the IT sector. Digitalization is essential for modernization, competitiveness, and efficiency of our economies. Therefore, I propose to adopt exchanges with IT experts and entrepreneurs, as well with the help of UNCTAD and other institutions, to explore how we can implement the Secretary General's roadmap on bridging the digital divide. Excellencies, dear colleagues, these are some thoughts and ideas that I wanted to share with you, and I hope to promote in the Economic and Social Council and in the HLPF this year. I would be very grateful to hear your views on these and on other issues, and to see how the ECOSOC could be useful to advance your country's priorities and objectives during my presidency. I thank you so much.